because media and free speech are the bulwark between people and the government. And that was all lost during COVID-19. So is not buying into the truth. They're the ones who influence elites, sadly, right? Then politicians and public health and the institutions that govern us can get away with all kinds of things that they shouldn't and that are dangerous for us. And I think the bottom line is that we have to trust each other. The idea that if I do not agree with you about trans education in schools doesn't mean I'm a terrible person. And I don't think you're a terrible person for wanting it. We have different information about it.
Tamara Ugolini here with Rebel News. I'm at the Revival Theatre on College Street in Toronto for the Free Speech in Crisis event. And there are a few different speakers, but one of them is Trish Wood from the Trish Wood is Critical podcast. We're going to catch up with her first and foremost and hear some off-the-cuff thoughts from this former CBC journalist. Check it out. When did Canada's free speech in crisis issue really come to a head for you and become apparent?
I think it was during COVID-19 because I was a science journalist at CBC, and for some reason during COVID all the rules changed about what people could and couldn't say, what journalists were prepared to say and wouldn't say, and it felt to me like all of the institutions, the whole of our institutions were lining up to support what we were led to believe was a consensus and what actually was not a consensus. And I knew it wasn't a consensus because I was following some of the dissident scientists who were saying, there's no evidence lockdowns work. Why aren't we protecting the vulnerable people? There's a huge risk stratification connected to this virus. Why are they doing this? It's making no sense. And then if you couple that with what we saw during especially lockdowns and the idea that they were causing great harm to many, many people, kids out of school, kids developing anxiety, suicides, drug and alcohol relapses, all kinds of terrible things were happening, cancer screenings canceled. I realized that the people who were pushing the edicts onto us also were not doing basic science, which is a risk-benefit ratio for everything you ask people to do in public health. You have to weigh the risks and the benefits. They weren't doing that. And I thought, how are they getting away with this? And the bottom line was, we were not allowed to talk about it. And this was probably my darkest day. It was just pre-convoy, because the convoy lifted that off of me and everybody else too, who was down about COVID. I realized that there was no way out, that if you do not have free speech and a neutral, objective media as a pillar of democracy, you do not have democracy. You are well and truly sunk. And I was seeing there was no way for us to fight back against the policies. In Ontario here, our premier handed the keys to the province to the public health people. So what do we do about that? Well, we have a demonstration, but the legacy media won't cover the demonstration, or they call everybody in the demonstration a racist or whatever the phraseology of the week is, or a bigot, far right, whatever.
Open it up more. And then you got a bunch of yahoos again that number one, hold the party. And then a whole bunch of 200 yahoos show up to hold the party. Like, guys, what? Like, man, come on. Like, what don't you get?
So what I realized, and it was a real shocker for me, was that this country cannot survive in an environment where people cannot say what they believe to be true. It makes us crazy. It gives the politicians the notion that they're never going to be held accountable, and they aren't. I'm not seeing any accountability over COVID-19. There's the National Citizens Inquiry, which was done by citizens. I think the government at this point is ignoring the report they put out. So that was tough. I had a long career as an investigative journalist. That was a good one. I won awards and I cared deeply about the business. And we made changes. We got an innocent man out of jail who'd been charged with murder. We did a lot of things in the business of actual journalism. Part of the stuff we did was also pharmaceutical products liability. So we never took a drug product and assumed that it was safe if there were safety signals that something was wrong. Our job was to expose the problem because media and free speech are the bulwark between people in the government. And that was all lost during COVID-19. So is not buying into the truth. They're the ones who influence elites, sadly, right? Then politicians and public health and the institutions that govern us can get away with all kinds of things that they shouldn't and that are dangerous for us.
And I suppose in that sense, too, they can sit up in their ivory towers sort of blissfully unaware, or at least the illusion that they're blissfully unaware of how the little people may be being affected by their policies and impositions. In your opinion, is there any saving face for the mainstream media? Can we come back from this? And if not, where do we go from here? What's the solution?
That's a great question, Tamara. I feel, and I've said this on my show, as long as Canadians are getting their information from different media silos, and that those media silos are feeding their confirmation biases, that means we've got two solitudes. We've got one group of people who believe one thing about the world, another group who believes something entirely else. So they're living in different realities, right? So then the question is, how do we get people back to where they were? When I was growing up, we all watched Walter Cronkite. The whole world did. Like, that's who we watched, right? So we, for good or ill, we had a kind of a baseline about what reality was. Now, there's more podcasts probably than there are living human beings. Everybody's got a Substack. And while that's a wonderful thing, people tend to curate to their own biases. I'm not optimistic this country will survive, actually. I'm quite down about that. And part of it was the way the media treated the convoy. The fact that the lies told about the convoy were all debunked, each and every one of them. I can list them, you know what they are, starting with the arson, Russia, Putin's, I mean, it was just absurd stuff.
The flags.
The flag, bad money coming into the Give, Send, Go and GoFundMe accounts. That was debunked by the head of FinTech. The RCMP said that didn't happen. But no one rolls that back. So I just came back from Ottawa, and there are many people in Ottawa who still believe those things. So what do you do about that? How do you change that reality? I don't know. Maybe grassroots level, maybe we get together in people's living rooms 10 at a time or 20 at a time, or maybe events like this, and try to put it back together. And I think the bottom line is that we have to trust each other. The idea that if I do not agree with you about trans education in schools doesn't mean I'm a terrible person. And I don't think you're a terrible person for wanting it. We have different information about it.
Do you think that there's space there for a more principled, moral leader to reinvigorate and re-glue our social fabric back together?
That's such a great question. I think if such a person existed, yes. I'm not sure they do. Because what we learned from the vaccine and from the truckers was that you can get up and tell lies about people, and the media didn't, did the media ever say, where's your evidence that they're racist and misogynistic? Where's your evidence that they're They didn't do that. They accepted those smears and they ran with them. So I think if politicians think they can get away with lying about people, they probably will. And my feeling right now about leadership in Western countries is that they're all, there's no grown-ups left. They're all embarrassing. I don't know. I feel like it would take a really special person. And my husband's really smart, and he thinks, and I think I agree with him, that really good people don't run for office right now because the attacks and the smears it's such dirty tactics that really good people can't be bothered with it anymore. So, I'm not seeing, unless, I don't know if a Bobby Kennedy, I don't mean the actual Bobby Kennedy Jr., but if a Kennedy type arose from the ashes somehow of Canadian politics, somebody really grown up and with a sophisticated worldview and who cared about all people, including the working class, yeah, maybe they could, but I don't see that happening anytime soon. I'm interviewing somebody this week who is a neurologist, and he says that this fire hose of propaganda that we drink from, the deplatforming and the silencing of people when they know they want to be speaking the truth is actually changing our brains. And I believe that that is true, because I feel like after COVID we're all a little bit most people tell me they're off, they're unstable, they have anxiety, cognitively they feel a bit impaired. And I wonder if that might have something to do with it. This is unnatural to be, well, I don't know if that's true. Is that true? That website says it's false. That one says it's missing. I mean, we can't live that way, not trusting our own eyes. And so I'm going to find out more about that. But my intuition tells me that he's probably right.
Well, thanks so much. I will hopefully check out that show. And here with Trish Woods at the Revival Theatre for the Free Speech in Crisis event. I'm Tamara Ugolini for Rebel News. If you want to find out how you can uphold free speech in wake of government-sanctioned censorship, please head over to our special website at stopthecensorship.ca. There you can find out what actions Rebel News is taking to make sure that a free, independent press and our free speech across the board is upheld. All of that and more at stopthecensorship.ca.